Today about how President Trump's acting attorney general and the man picked to replace him will handle the Russia investigation. The Justice Department said acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker will not recuse himself in the Russia probe. We're told ethics officials would have recommended recusal if Whitaker asked them for their opinion, but Whitaker never posed the question. At the same time, President Trump's pick to replace Whitaker, William Barr, is facing scrutiny over a memo he wrote in which he reportedly criticized Mueller's work. Let's bring in Rebecca Roiphe. She is a former assistant district attorney here in New York City and is now a professor of law at New York Law School. Rebecca, thanks so much for being here. Let me just get your initial reaction to this Whitaker news. What did you think when you heard it?
Well, I think that it's really in some ways, I think it's sort of shocking that he's not recusing himself. More importantly, though, to me, is that he didn't go through the right process, because these processes are put in place in order to make sure that these ethics experts who are nonpartisan and have dedicated themselves to these issues get to weigh in on these points, rather than kind of making the decision on his own, which is extremely problematic.
So, Whitaker has criticized the scope of Mueller's investigation here, and I wonder what impact you think that has on the day-to-day work of those prosecutors working for the special counsel's office.
Well, I think what's a little bit unclear is who's actually taking that responsibility. So is it Rod Rosenstein or is it Whitaker? We know that Whitaker now has control because he hasn't recused himself. So he gets to make final decisions about certain things, and that's going to matter. But in terms of the day-to-day, I don't think that there's any sign that Whitaker has had his fingers in these determinations. Things seem to be going along as they were before and proceeding. So I really doubt that he does, but it's hard to know. And at what point might he change his mind and decide to get more involved?
Right. And does just the specter of the possibility that he could, in fact, involve himself, does that somehow affect the day-to-day prosecutors' work?
There have been specters over this investigation since its beginning, and I think that the Justice Department has been remarkably resilient in resisting the pressure that has come from the president, and now I imagine pressure that might be coming from Whitaker as well. So I feel confident that they'll be able to do that as long as they're actually in a position to protect Mueller. But if they lose that position, then I think it's a little bit of a harder call.
So Whitaker is not only overseeing the Russia probe, but other federal investigations involving the president and his associates. Do you think that that could be a factor then in these other investigations as well? Because it's this sort of same idea that while there might not be a direct kind of involvement, nevertheless, there is an awareness that the person overseeing this, right?
Especially the Southern District is sort of historically independent from central DOJ. So it does its own thing as a general matter, which isn't to say it defies, rules or any instruction that comes from somebody who's superior, but they really operate in their own way. So I don't think, unless there was an active effort to interfere, that it would have an effect. Again, because I think these institutions are strong, and I really think that they've been remarkably proceeding well in really terrible conditions. So I think that will continue to happen unless somebody actually tries to do something to interfere.
So we mentioned that memo from the president's nominee for Attorney General William Barr. In it, he writes, quote, Mueller should not be permitted to demand that the president submit to interrogation about alleged obstruction, and continues writing, quote, Mueller is proposing an unprecedented expansion of obstruction laws so as to reach facially lawful actions taken by the president in exercising the discretion vested in him by the Constitution. So, Rebecca, first of all, translate that, but what do you make of his arguments there?
Well, I have to say one thing first, which is I think we just need to take a step back, and it is completely shocking that it seems to be a motivation of the president in terms of picking his attorney general, both in Whitaker and in Barr, that person has suggested that they are against the investigation into the president and the president's campaign. That is shocking. So before we get into the details, I just want to
make a note of that.
Make totally clear that is shocking and unprecedented.
Yeah.
Okay. So
duly noted, Rebecca Roiphe. Okay. Clearly something you feel strongly about.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in terms of the legal arguments, so here's you can make a legal argument. Lawyers can make legal arguments. This memo seems like a good application for a job to be the president's lawyer. It is not a good sign for somebody who is supposed to be the attorney general, who's supposed to exercise independence. It is extremely concerning. Any lawyer should be very careful about giving an opinion if they don't have all the facts. And the thing is here, none of us have all the facts. Now, I mean, you can go, we can have this conversation and speculate. But when we're speculating, I would never give my legal opinion without, in a way like that, in a memo, without a full understanding of the facts. So to suggest that there's, no obstruction of justice or that the subpoena should go, none of that can he give a really qualified opinion unless he has the facts, and he doesn't. Yeah. So I think that's concerning.
So, and just because you made a point to note that, also just remind us, when an Attorney General of the United States is sworn in, to what does that Attorney General swear his or her allegiance? It's not to the individual, the President of the United States.
No. The Attorney General and all of the United States attorneys and assistant United States attorneys swear their allegiance to the United States Constitution and to the laws of the United States. And so they owe their obligation to those laws and to the people of this country and the citizens of this country to make sure that they're impartially executed. And that's how every prosecutor sees their job. Right. Or ought to see their job.
Right. So Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein said that Barr's memo had no impact on their investigation. So why would someone like Barr write such a memo, do you think, Rebecca? And how would Justice Department officials actually use that, you think?
Well, I don't actually think he probably intended to affect the investigation as much as he did to send a message to the president about where he stands on this. And that was obviously successful. So I think that's what he intended to do. But then again, there have been these repeated assaults and pressure on these officials from political partisans. And I think, eventually it has to have some effect on them. Whether that effect is, to actually change what they do or not, I certainly hope not. And there's been no indication so far that that's what's happened. But, it's concerning. There are norms surrounding all of this, that this does not happen. I mean, you can send a letter, the Department of Justice gets letters like that all the time. Sure. But, you wouldn't do that from private practice. I mean, it's just unusual. Why would you do that from private practice? It makes really no sense unless you're kind of, it's a job application.
Yeah, as you said, it seems to be a message here clearly intended for an audience of one in this case. All right. Rebecca Roiphe. Rebecca, we could stand here and talk all day, but you know what? We don't have all that time. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
See you next year.
Yes.